What happens when the joke you made about your marriage ends with divorce papers on your kitchen table? How far can you push someone before they stop being the villain and start fighting back, legally? I never thought one careless comment in front of my friends would lead to my husband making my worst jokes come true. The wine glass trembled in my hand as I watched Oliver's face crumble across our living room. I'd done it again, made him the punchline of my story, and this time I'd gone too far. So, there I was, I continued, my voice carrying that practiced tone I used when I wanted attention, stuck at home with Mr. Excitement over there, wondering if this is really what the rest of my life looks like. I gestured toward Oliver, who was quietly refilling everyone's drinks like the good host he always tried to be. My friends laughed. Well, most of them did. Sarah practically snorted her wine, and Jennifer was shaking her head with that knowing smile women get when they think they're sharing some universal truth about marriage. But I noticed Cassidy just stirred her drink uncomfortably, and Oliver's mother Helen sat stone-faced in the corner armchair. "Nerissa," Helen said quietly, her voice carrying that edge I'd learned to recognize over the years, "perhaps we could talk about something else." I felt my cheeks flush, but not from embarrassment, from irritation. Here was Oliver's mother again, trying to police my conversations in my own home. "Oh, come on, Helen, it's just girl talk. We're all friends here." "Are we?" Helen's grey eyes fixed on mine with an intensity that made me shift in my seat. "Because friends don't usually humiliate each other for entertainment." The room went quiet except for the soft clink of Oliver setting down the wine bottle. He stood there for a moment, his shoulders slightly hunched in that way that made him look smaller than his 6-foot frame, before excusing himself to check on the kids. "He's too sensitive," I said quickly, filling the awkward silence. "That's always been his problem. Can't take a joke." Sarah nodded enthusiastically. "Men are like that. They dish it out but can't take it." But I caught Jennifer exchanging a look with Cassidy, and something cold settled in my stomach. These were my friends. They were supposed to be on my side. They were supposed to understand that I needed this outlet, this way to vent about the frustrations of being married to someone who never surprised me, never made me feel desired, never made me feel like the woman I used to be before kids and mortgages and the endless routine of suburban life. "I mean, seriously," I continued, desperate to win back their approval. "Sometimes I think I need a real man, you know? Someone who actually has some fire in him." The words hung in the air longer than I'd intended. Helen stood up abruptly, her face pale with anger. "I think I should go," she said, gathering her purse with sharp, efficient movements. "Oliver, I'm leaving," she called toward the kitchen. He appeared in the doorway, still holding a dish towel, his dark hair slightly mussed where he'd run his hand through it, a nervous habit I used to find endearing. "Mum? Everything okay?" "Everything's fine, sweetheart. I just remembered I have an early morning." She kissed his cheek and shot me one final look that could have frozen fire. "Thank you for dinner. It was illuminating." After she left, the party deflated like a punctured balloon. My friends made polite excuses and filtered out one by one, leaving me and Oliver to clean up in uncomfortable silence. "You didn't have to be so harsh," Oliver said finally, his voice barely above a whisper, as he loaded the dishwasher. "She was just trying to what? Control what I say in my own house?" I slammed a wine glass down harder than necessary, and it cracked against the granite countertop. "God, Oliver, sometimes I think you care more about your mother's feelings than your wife's." He turned to face me, and for a moment I saw something in his eyes I didn't recognize. Not hurt, which I was used to, but something colder. "What feelings, Nerissa? You spent the entire evening making jokes about how disappointing I am. What am I supposed to care about in that?" "It was just banter. Everyone does it. Sarah complains about Mike all the time, and he laughs about it." "Sarah doesn't tell a room full of people that she needs a real man instead of her husband." The words hit me like a slap, partly because he was right, and partly because I hadn't realized he'd heard that part. I opened my mouth to defend myself, to explain that it wasn't what I meant, but the words wouldn't come. I'm sleeping in the guest room tonight, Oliver said quietly, hanging up the dish towel with careful precision. I need some space. After he left, I stood alone in our kitchen, surrounded by the debris of the evening. My phone buzzed with a text from Kellen, my trainer at the gym. How was your night? Thinking about you. I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, wish I was with you instead. The words appeared on my screen in that blue bubble, and I felt a thrill of rebellion mixed with guilt. This was Oliver's fault, I told myself. If he made me feel appreciated, if he made me feel desired, I wouldn't need attention from other men. I was about to put my phone away when I noticed Oliver standing in the doorway, his face illuminated by the glow from the screen. Our eyes met for just a second before he turned and walked away. But I knew he'd seen the light, seen me texting someone at nearly midnight. I waited for him to come back, to ask who I was talking to fight for me the way a real man would. But he didn't. The house settled into silence, and I was left alone with the uncomfortable feeling that I'd just crossed a line I couldn't uncross. 3 weeks later, I was sitting across from Oliver at Meridian, the upscale bistro downtown, where we'd brought our friends for what I'd optimistically called a reconciliation dinner. The tension from that night at our house had never really faded, just settled into our daily routine like dust on furniture. Always there, but easy to ignore if you didn't look too closely. The salmon here is supposed to be amazing, Jennifer said, scanning her menu with the kind of forced enthusiasm people use when they're trying to pretend everything is normal. Oliver nodded politely, but I could see the strain around his eyes. He'd been different since that night, more distant, more careful with his words. Sometimes I caught him watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read, like he was trying to solve a puzzle he didn't want to understand. So, Nerissa, Sarah said, leaning forward with that conspiratorial smile I recognized, how are things at home? You and Oliver working through your differences? I felt my cheeks warm. Trust Sarah to dive right into the awkwardness. We're fine, I said quickly, but even as the words left my mouth, I felt the familiar urge to elaborate, to get sympathy, to make myself the interesting one at the table. I mean, we're working on communication. Communication, Mike repeated with a chuckle. That's what my ex-wife used to say right before she started sleeping with her yoga instructor. The table went quiet, and I saw Oliver's jaw tighten. But instead of defending us, instead of shutting down the conversation, I felt myself leaning into it. Well, it's hard when you feel like you're married to your roommate instead of your lover, I said, my voice carrying just enough of a laugh to make it sound like a joke. Sometimes a girl needs to feel like a woman, you know? Jennifer shifted uncomfortably in her seat, and I noticed Cassidy hadn't said much all evening, but Sarah was nodding enthusiastically, and I felt that familiar rush of validation. Exactly. Men just don't understand that we need passion, excitement. We need to feel desired. I desire you, Oliver said quietly, his voice so soft I almost didn't hear him. I've always desired you. The words should have made me feel guilty, but instead they irritated me. He was making me look bad in front of our friends, making me seem like the unreasonable one. Wanting to have sex twice a month isn't the same thing as desire, Oliver, I said, and I saw him flinch like I'd slapped him. I'm talking about real passion, the kind that makes you feel alive. Like what you have with your trainer. Helen's voice cut through the conversation like a knife. I turned to see Oliver's mother standing beside our table, her face a mask of controlled fury. I hadn't even noticed her enter the restaurant. Helen, Oliver said, half rising from his chair, what are you doing here? I was having dinner with the Clarks, she said, gesturing toward a table across the room. But I couldn't help overhearing your wife's colorful commentary on your marriage. My heart started pounding. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you? Helen's eyes were ice cold. Kellen Reese, 28 years old, works at Fitness First downtown. Ring any bells? The blood drained from my face. Around the table, I could see our friends processing this information, their expression shifting from confusion to understanding to judgment. Oliver looked like someone had punched him in the stomach. "Helen, please," he said, his voice strained. "Not here." "Why not here?" she snapped. "She doesn't seem to have any problem discussing your private life in public. Maybe it's time everyone knew the truth about why she needs a real man." I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. "I don't have to listen to this. You've always hated me, Helen. You've been looking for an excuse to— To what? To protect my son from a woman who humiliates him in public while she's having an affair." The word affair hung in the air like a bomb that had just exploded. I could hear the silence stretching around our table, could feel the eyes of other diners turning toward us. Oliver sat frozen, staring at his plate like it might provide some escape from the nightmare our evening had become. "It's not an affair," I said, my voice shaking. "We're just friends. He's my trainer." "Friends don't meet in parking lots at 11 o'clock at night," Helen said coldly. "Friends don't text each other, 'I can't stop thinking about you,' at midnight." I felt the world tilt sideways. How could she possibly know about the texts, about the parking lot? Oliver finally looked up at me, and the expression on his face broke something inside my chest. It wasn't anger or hurt. It was resignation, like he'd been waiting for this moment, and now that it was here, he was almost relieved. "Is it true?" he asked quietly. I opened my mouth to deny it, to explain, to make him understand that it wasn't what it looked like, but the words wouldn't come. Around the table, our friends sat in stunned silence, and I realized that my need for attention, my need to be the center of every conversation, had finally destroyed everything. "I need some air," I said, grabbing my purse and rushing toward the exit. In the parking lot, I fumbled for my phone and called Kellen. He answered on the second ring. "Nerissa, what's wrong?" "Everything," I said, my voice breaking. "Can you meet me? I need to see you." "Of course. Where?" "The gym parking lot. 20 minutes." I drove across town in a daze, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. This was Oliver's fault, I told myself. If he'd been the husband I needed, if he'd made me feel valued and desired, none of this would have happened. I was just trying to find what was missing in my marriage. Kellen was waiting for me when I arrived, leaning against his car in the empty parking lot. He was everything Oliver wasn't: confident, muscular, exciting. When he pulled me into his arms, I felt that rush of being wanted, of being the kind of woman men fought over. "What happened?" he asked, stroking my hair. "Oliver's mother knows about us. She humiliated me in front of everyone." "Hey, it's okay," he murmured against my ear. "We'll figure this out." But as I stood there in his arms, I couldn't shake the image of Oliver's face at the restaurant, not angry or jealous, but tired, like he'd been carrying a weight for so long that he'd forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. What I didn't know was that across the street, a traffic camera was recording everything, and Oliver's lawyer would later use that footage to document the exact time and date of our embrace. I didn't know that Oliver had already started building a case, collecting evidence, preparing for the war I thought I was winning. All I knew was that I felt justified in seeking comfort from someone who made me feel alive, and I pushed away the small voice in my head that whispered I might be making the biggest mistake of my life. The Monday morning after the restaurant disaster, I walked into my office at Meridian Marketing with my head held high, determined to control the narrative before it could spiral out of control. But the moment I stepped through the glass doors, I could feel the change in the atmosphere. Conversation stopped when I passed. Eyes followed me down the hallway. The usual morning greetings were replaced with awkward nods and forced smiles. By the time I reached my cubicle, I knew the story had already spread through our small company like wildfire. "Morning, Nerissa," said Tom from the next cube over, his voice carefully neutral. "How was your weekend?" "Fine," I replied, settling into my chair and powering up my computer. "Just fine." But it wasn't fine. Nothing was fine. Oliver had barely spoken to me since Saturday night, communicating only about logistics. Who would pick up Ava from soccer practice? What time Milo's dentist appointment was scheduled? He'd moved his things into the guest room permanently, and when I tried to talk to him about what happened at the restaurant, he'd simply said, "I think we should give each other some space right now." "Nerissa?" Cassidy appeared at my cubicle entrance, her expression cautious. "Can we talk?" I followed her to the break room, hoping for an ally, someone who would understand my side of the story. But the moment we were alone, I could see from her face that this wasn't going to be the supportive conversation I needed. "What the hell happened Saturday night?" she asked, keeping her voice low. "Helen accused you of having an affair in front of everyone." "Helen has always hated me," I said, pouring myself coffee with hands that weren't quite steady. "She's been looking for ways to turn Oliver against me since the day we got married." "But is it true? About the trainer?" I hesitated for just a moment too long, and I saw understanding dawn in Cassidy's eyes. "Jesus, Nerissa, you're actually cheating on Oliver." "It's not cheating," I said quickly. "It's not like that. Kellen and I are just... we understand each other. He makes me feel appreciated in ways that Oliver never has." "You have 2 kids with Oliver. You've been married for 8 years. 8 years of feeling invisible." The words came out louder than I intended, and I quickly lowered my voice. "Do you know what it's like to be married to someone who takes you completely for granted? Who never makes you feel desired or exciting or even interesting?" Cassidy stared at me for a long moment. "Oliver worships the ground you walk on, Nerissa. Everyone can see that except you. If he worshipped me, I wouldn't need to look elsewhere for attention." "Listen to yourself," Cassidy said, her voice sharp with disbelief. "You're blaming him for your affair. You're making yourself the victim in a situation where you're cheating on your husband." I felt my face flush with anger. "I thought you were my friend." "I am your friend. That's why I'm telling you that you're about to destroy your family for some guy at the gym who probably tells every woman he trains that she's special." The words hit me like a slap, partly because I'd had the same thought myself during my more honest moments. But I couldn't admit that, couldn't acknowledge that maybe I was the one in the wrong. "You don't understand," I said coldly. "You're not married. You don't know what it's like to feel trapped." Cassidy's expression hardened. "And you don't know what it's like to watch someone you care about destroy something good because they're too selfish to appreciate what they have." She walked out of the break room, leaving me alone with my coffee and the uncomfortable realization that I was losing allies faster than I could count them. The rest of the day was a nightmare of whispered conversations and sideways glances. During the lunch break, I overheard Jennifer talking to someone from accounting. She actually admitted it right there at the table. Poor Oliver just sat there like someone had shot his dog. By 5 o'clock, I was desperate to get home, to find some sanctuary from the judgment and gossip. But when I pulled into our driveway, I saw Oliver loading the kids into his car. "Where are you going?" I asked, walking over to them. "Mom's house for dinner," he said without looking at me. "The kids need some normal family time." "I'm their family too." "Are you?" He finally met my eyes, and I saw something there that made my stomach drop. "Because lately, it seems like your priorities are elsewhere." Ava looked between us with the kind of worried expression no 7-year-old should have to wear. "Mommy, are you and Daddy fighting?" "No, sweetheart," I said quickly, forcing a smile. "We're just talking." But 4-year-old Milo was more direct. "Why does Daddy sleep in the other room now? Did you do something bad?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. Oliver's jaw tightened, and I felt exposed, like my children could see right through me. "We'll talk about this later," Oliver said, buckling Milo into his car seat. "Kids, say goodbye to Mommy." As I watched them drive away, I felt a surge of anger that surprised me with its intensity. This was exactly what I'd been talking about. Oliver making unilateral decisions, excluding me from family activities, turning my own children against me. He was the one being unreasonable, the one who couldn't forgive a simple mistake. I went inside and called Kellen. "Can you come over?" I asked when he answered. "Oliver took the kids to his mother's." "I don't know, Nerissa. After what happened Saturday night, maybe we should cool things down for a while. The rejection stung more than it should have. So you're abandoning me too? I'm not abandoning you. I'm just saying maybe this isn't the best time. The best time for what? For you to be there when I need you. I thought you cared about me. There was a long pause. I do care about you, but I'm not looking to be the reason someone's marriage falls apart. My marriage was already falling apart. That's why I needed you in the first place. After I hung up, I sat alone in my living room, surrounded by the toys and family photos that suddenly felt like evidence of a life I was systematically destroying. My phone buzzed with a text from my brother Jude. Heard about Saturday night. Are you okay? I started to type back a long explanation about how everyone was overreacting, how I was just trying to find happiness, how Oliver was as much to blame as I was. But before I could send it, I heard Oliver's key in the front door. He came in alone, his face grim. Where are the kids? I asked. Staying at Mom's tonight. We need to talk. He sat down across from me, and I noticed he was holding a manila folder. What's that? Phone records, he said quietly. From the last 3 months. Would you like to explain why you've been texting and calling Kellen Reese at all hours of the day and night? My heart started pounding. How did you get my phone records? I'm on the account, Narissa. I have every right to access them. You've been spying on me. I've been trying to understand why my wife has been lying to me for months. He opened the folder and spread out several pages of phone logs, highlighting my calls and texts to Kellen in yellow marker. The evidence was damning. Hundreds of messages, calls that lasted hours, contact that started innocent but quickly became constant. This isn't what it looks like, I said, but the words sounded weak even to me. Then what is it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like my wife has been having an emotional affair that's probably turned physical, and she's been lying about it while making me feel like I'm the problem in our marriage. The calm way he said it was somehow worse than if he'd been screaming. This wasn't the Oliver I was used to, the one who backed down from confrontation, who let me control the narrative. This was someone I didn't recognize. I never meant for this to happen, I said, and for the first time, I felt the weight of what I'd done settling on my shoulders. But it did happen, and now I have to decide what to do about it. He gathered up the papers and stood to leave, then turned back to me. For what it's worth, Narissa, I really did love you. I thought I wasn't enough for you, and I spent years trying to figure out how to be better. But I realize now that the problem was never me. After he left, I sat alone in the gathering darkness, finally understanding that the joke I'd been making about needing a new man might be about to become a reality, just not in the way I'd imagined. 2 weeks later, I was standing in the hallway outside Ava's classroom, waiting for parent-teacher conferences and trying to pretend that my life wasn't falling apart. Oliver stood beside me, but we might as well have been strangers. We'd barely spoken since the night he'd confronted me with the phone records, communicating only through terse texts about pickup times and school events. Mr. and Mrs. Vane, Mrs. Patterson, Ava's teacher, appeared in the doorway with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Please, come in. We settled into the tiny plastic chairs across from her desk, and I immediately knew this wasn't going to be a routine conference. Mrs. Patterson had that careful expression teachers get when they're about to deliver bad news. How is Ava doing academically? Oliver asked, his voice professionally polite. Her grades are fine, Mrs. Patterson said, shuffling through a folder of papers. But I'm concerned about some behavioral changes I've noticed over the past few weeks. She's been more withdrawn in class, less engaged with her friends. Yesterday, she asked me if teachers ever get divorced. I felt my cheeks burn. Kids ask random questions all the time. Of course they do, but combined with some other things I've observed, she's been more clingy during drop-off, more anxious about being picked up on time. I just wanted to check in and see how things are at home. Oliver and I exchanged a look, and I could see the guilt and worry in his eyes. Whatever was happening between us, we both loved our children, and the thought that our problems were affecting them made my stomach twist. "We're going through a rough patch," Oliver said carefully, "but we're trying to keep the kids out of it." "That's good to hear. Children are very perceptive, though. They pick up on tension even when we think we're hiding it well." After we left the school, Oliver and I stood in the parking lot in awkward silence. It was the first time we'd been alone together in days. "We need to do better," he said finally. "Whatever's happening between us, the kids don't deserve to suffer for it." "I agree," I said, and I meant it. "Maybe we could try counseling." He looked at me for a long moment and I saw something flicker across his face. Hope, maybe, or just exhaustion. "I don't know, Nerissa. I don't know if counseling can fix this. We have to try, for Ava and Milo." "Do we? Or are we just prolonging something that's already over?" The question hung between us like a challenge. I wanted to argue, to insist that we could work through this, but the truth was that I wasn't sure I wanted to. The past few weeks had shown me how different we were, how incompatible our needs and expectations had become. "I should go," Oliver said, checking his watch. "I'm picking up the kids from Mom's." "When are you bringing them home?" "Tonight, but I'm staying at Mom's for a few more days. I think we both need space to figure out what we want." After he drove away, I sat in my car for a long time, staring at my phone. I had 17 missed texts from Kellen, most of them asking when we could see each other again. Since our last conversation, he'd been more persistent, more demanding of my time and attention. What had started as exciting and validating was beginning to feel suffocating. I drove home to an empty house and poured myself a large glass of wine. The silence felt oppressive, filled with the ghosts of family dinners and bedtime stories, and all the ordinary moments that make up a life together. I found myself wandering through the rooms, looking at wedding photos and family vacation pictures, trying to remember when I'd stopped being happy. My phone rang, and I saw my brother Jude's name on the screen. "Hey," I said, grateful for the distraction. "Hey yourself, how are you holding up?" "I'm fine," I lied. "Everything's fine." "Nerissa." His voice was gentle but firm. "Mom told me about the restaurant thing, and Helen called me." My stomach dropped. "Helen called you?" "She's worried about Oliver. And honestly, after talking to her, I'm worried about you too." "Since when do you and Helen have heart-to-heart conversations?" "Since my sister started having an affair and blowing up her family." The words hit me like a physical blow. I'm not blowing up my family. I'm trying to find some happiness in a marriage that stopped working years ago. "By cheating on your husband?" "It's not that simple, Jude. You don't understand what it's like to be married to someone who what? Who loves you? Who works his ass off to provide for you and the kids? Who's never given you a reason not to trust him?" I felt tears starting to build behind my eyes. "You're supposed to be on my side." "I am on your side. That's why I'm telling you that you're making a huge mistake. Oliver is a good man, Nerissa. He's not perfect, but he's good. And you're about to lose him over some guy at the gym who probably doesn't give a damn about you or your kids. Kellen cares about me. Kellen is sleeping with a married woman. That tells you everything you need to know about his character." After we hung up, I felt more alone than ever. It seemed like everyone in my life was turning against me, choosing Oliver's side without bothering to understand mine. They saw him as the victim and me as the villain, but it wasn't that simple. I had needs too, dreams too, a right to be happy too. I was pouring my third glass of wine when I heard a car in the driveway. Through the window, I saw Oliver's sedan, and my heart jumped. Maybe he'd changed his mind about staying at his mother's. Maybe he wanted to talk, to work things out. But when he came inside, he wasn't carrying an overnight bag. Instead, he had a manila folder and a look of grim determination. "We need to talk," he said. "Okay." I set down my wine glass and tried to read his expression. "What's wrong?" "I've been to see a lawyer." The words hit me like ice water. "A lawyer? Oliver, don't you think that's a little extreme? We haven't even tried counseling yet." "Haven't we? Because it seems to me like you've already made your choice." He opened the folder and pulled out a stack of papers. These are separation papers. I'm filing for legal separation and primary custody of the children. My legs felt weak. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. I've tried to make this work, Narissa. I've tried to be understanding, to give you space, to figure out how to be the husband you need. But I can't compete with someone else for my own wife's attention. I'll end it, I said quickly. I'll stop seeing Kellen. We can go to counseling, work on our marriage. It's too late for that. It's not too late. We have 8 years together, 2 children. And you threw it all away for a guy you've known for 3 months. The finality in his voice scared me more than the papers in his hand. This wasn't the Oliver I'd married, the one who always backed down from conflict. This was someone who'd made a decision and wasn't going to be swayed by tears or promises. What about the kids? I asked, my voice breaking. They'll be fine. Better than fine, actually, once they're not living in a house full of tension and lies. You can't take my children away from me. I'm not taking them away, but I am going to make sure they have a stable home environment. The custody arrangement is generous. You'll have them every other weekend and 1 evening a week. The silence that followed Kellen's hang-up was worse than any scream. I sat on the living room floor, back against the couch, knees pulled to my chest, the divorce papers fanned out in front of me like a losing poker hand. The house felt cavernous now. Every laugh that used to echo off these walls had been packed into suitcases and driven away. I could still smell the faint trace of Lily's grape bubblegum lip balm on the throw pillow beside me. I didn't cry right away. The tears came later, in ugly, choking waves that left my face swollen and my throat raw. When they finally slowed, I forced myself to stand. My legs felt borrowed. I walked to the kitchen, opened the fridge out of habit, and stared at the half-eaten casserole Oliver had made last Sunday. Lasagna, his mother's recipe, the one he always insisted on making when the kids were sick or when I was too tired to cook. I closed the door without taking anything out. Upstairs, the children's rooms looked untouched, frozen in time. Mia's desk was still covered in half-finished friendship bracelets and coloured pencils. Lily's bed had Mr. Carrots propped against the pillow, one floppy ear bent forward, as if listening for her return. I picked up the rabbit and pressed it to my face. It smelled like strawberry shampoo and warm sleep. I sank onto Lily's bed and let the sobs come again, quieter this time, the kind that hurt your ribs. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from my sister. Heard from Mom. Are you okay? Call me. I didn't answer. What could I say? That I'd thrown away a good man and 2 perfect children for stolen afternoons and whispered promises that evaporated the moment reality knocked. I opened my messages with Kellen instead. The last string stretched back months, flirty emojis, late night, I can't stop thinking about you, photos I deleted from my camera roll, but not from memory. I scrolled until I found the first one that crossed the line. A selfie he'd sent from his hotel room in Chicago, shirt unbuttoned, caption, "Wish you were here instead of there." I'd replied with a heart eyes emoji and a photo of my own cleavage taken in the laundry room while Oliver was downstairs, helping Mia with homework. I deleted the entire thread. Then I blocked his number. The next morning I woke on Lily's floor, neck stiff, eyes crusted shut. Sunlight sliced through the blinds in cruel, cheerful stripes. I showered, dressed in yesterday's clothes because everything else felt like a costume, and drove to the park where Oliver used to take the kids on Saturday mornings. He was there, pushing Lily on the swings while Mia practiced cartwheels on the grass. I stayed in the car for a long minute, watching the scene like a stranger peering through a window. Oliver looked different, shoulders straighter, jaw set, in a way I hadn't seen since the early days, when he was still proving he could be the man I needed. Lily laughed at something he said, and the sound cut straight through me. I got out slowly. Mia spotted me first. "Mummy!" She ran over, arms wide, and I dropped to my knees to catch her. Lily followed, slower, eyeing me like she wasn't sure if I was real. Oliver stopped pushing the swing and walked over. No anger in his face, just exhaustion and something softer. Resignation, maybe pity. "You shouldn't be here unannounced," he said quietly. "I know, I just needed to see them." He nodded once. 5 minutes, then we have to go." I sat on the bench with the girls while Oliver stood a few feet away, arms crossed, watching us like a guard. Lily climbed into my lap and asked in her small voice, "Are you coming home tonight?" I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Not tonight, baby, but soon I'll see you every other weekend, and we'll have special mummy days, okay?" She nodded, uncertain. Mia squeezed my hand. "Daddy said we're going to get ice cream after this. You can come if you want." I looked up at Oliver. He gave the smallest shake of his head, not cruel, just final. When the 5 minutes were up, he called them gently. They hugged me so hard, I thought my heart might crack open. Then they ran to him, and he took their hands without looking back. I stayed on the bench long after they left, watching other families, other mothers, who still had the luxury of ordinary days. A little boy fell off the slide and started crying. His mom scooped him up, kissed his scraped knee, murmured something soothing. I envied her with a violence that surprised me. That afternoon, I called a therapist whose card had been sitting in my wallet for 2 years, ever since the postpartum fog with Lily that I'd pretended wasn't there. I left a voicemail. She called back within the hour and had an opening the next day. I went. The first session, I mostly cried. The second, I started talking about the restlessness that had felt like drowning, about how Kellen had made me feel seen when I thought no one was looking, about how I'd convinced myself Oliver's steadiness was boredom instead of safety. The therapist listened without judgment and asked gentle questions that made me flinch. By the 4th session, I admitted the hardest truth. I hadn't just betrayed Oliver. I'd betrayed myself. The woman I'd become in those secret months wasn't freer or more alive. She was smaller, hungrier, always waiting for the next text to feel worthy. Months passed in slow, aching increments. I attended every court-mandated parenting class. I showed up for every visitation, on time, sober, present. Oliver and I learned to speak in neutral tones about school projects and dentist appointments. We didn't fight. We didn't reminisce. We just tried to keep the children from feeling the full weight of what we'd broken. One evening, after dropping the girls off, Oliver lingered at the door. "They asked about you today," he said. "Mia wants to know if you still love us." My throat closed. "I do, more than anything." He studied me for a long moment. "I believe you mean that now." It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't reconciliation, but it was something, permission maybe, to keep trying to be better. I drove home to a quiet house that no longer felt like a tomb. I lit a candle on the kitchen counter. The one Oliver used to complain smelled like fancy soap. Then I opened my laptop and started looking at apartments closer to the kids' school. Smaller, simpler, mine. The life I'd torched wasn't coming back, but a different one might still be built, honest this time, scarred, slower. And maybe, if I worked hard enough, the girls would one day look at me and see not the woman who left, but the one who stayed, even after everything. The mediation office smelled like stale coffee and broken dreams. I sat across from Oliver at a polished conference table, our lawyers flanking us like generals preparing for war. 3 months had passed since he'd served me with separation papers, and in that time, my life had completely unraveled. Kellen had disappeared from my life the moment things got legally complicated. My friends had chosen sides, and most of them had chosen Oliver's. Even my own brother Jude had grown distant, offering only perfunctory support when I called crying about how unfair everything was. "Mrs. Vane," said Oliver's attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Rebecca Chen, "we'd like to discuss the evidence we've compiled regarding your extramarital affair." She opened a thick folder and began laying out documents like she was dealing cards. Phone records showing hundreds of texts and calls to Kellen. bank statements showing cash withdrawals I'd used for hotel rooms, credit card receipts from restaurants where I'd met him for lunch. But the worst was the video footage. "This is from a traffic camera at the intersection of 5th and Main," Rebecca said, sliding a tablet across the table. The timestamp shows 11:47 p.m. on March 15th. I watched myself on the small screen, embracing Kellen in the gym parking lot, kissing him like a woman who wasn't married, who didn't have 2 children at home, wondering why Daddy was sleeping in the guest room. "This is harassment," my lawyer said weakly. "My client's private life has no bearing on her fitness as a mother." "Doesn't it?" Rebecca pulled out another document. "Mrs. Vane, can you explain why you withdrew $300 in cash on the afternoon of March 20th, then checked into the Marriott downtown under a false name?" I felt my face burn with shame and anger. "You had me followed? We had a private investigator document your activities, yes, which is perfectly legal when establishing grounds for divorce." Oliver sat quietly through all of this, his face impassive. He looked thinner than he had 3 months ago, older somehow, but also more confident. The man who used to apologize for taking up space now sat with his shoulders straight, meeting my eyes when I looked at him. "I want to speak to my wife privately," he said suddenly. The lawyers exchanged glances. "I don't think that's advisable," Rebecca said. 5 minutes, in the hallway." We stepped outside the conference room, and for a moment we just stood there, looking at each other. Up close, I could see the toll the last few months had taken on him. The lines around his eyes, the way he held himself like someone who'd learned not to trust. "You don't have to do this," I said quietly. "We can work this out without lawyers and private investigators." "Can we? Because every time I've tried to work things out with you, you've lied to me." "I never meant for any of this to happen. But it did happen, and you kept making choices that took you further away from our family." I felt tears starting to build. "I know I made mistakes, but..." "Mistakes?" His voice was quiet but sharp. "Narissa, you had an affair. You humiliated me in public. You lied to me for months. Those aren't mistakes. They're choices." I was unhappy. So was I. But I didn't deal with it by finding someone else. The simple truth of that statement hit me harder than all the evidence in that folder. Oliver had been unhappy too. I could see that now, looking back at the careful way he'd tried to please me, the way he'd absorbed my criticism, and tried to become whatever I said I needed. "What about the kids?" I asked. "Don't they deserve to have both parents in their lives?" "They do, but they also deserve to see what a healthy relationship looks like, and we can't give them that. We could try counseling. I did try counseling, by myself. Dr. Martinez helped me understand that I can't fix a marriage when only one person wants to be married." The words hung between us like a final judgment. I wanted to argue, to insist that I did want to be married, but the truth was more complicated than that. I wanted the security of marriage, the status of being a wife and mother, but I didn't want Oliver. Not really. Not the way a wife should want her husband. "So, what happens now?" I asked. "Now we go back in there and finalize the divorce. You get the house and half the assets. I get primary custody of the kids. You get them every other weekend and Wednesday evenings." "That's not enough time." "It's what you chose when you chose Kellen over your family." We went back into the conference room, and I signed papers that officially ended 8 years of marriage. The whole process took less than an hour. A few signatures, some legal language, and everything we'd built together was reduced to a custody schedule and a division of property. Afterward, I sat in my car in the parking garage, staring at my copy of the divorce decree. Oliver had already left to pick up the kids from school. Our kids, who would now spend most of their time in a small apartment across town, while I rattled around in our 4-bedroom house alone. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "How did it go, sweetheart?" I stared at the message for a long time before typing back, "It's over." "Good," she replied. "Now you can find someone who appreciates you." But sitting there in the dim light of the parking garage, I realized I'd already had someone who appreciated me. I'd had a husband who loved me enough to try to become whatever I said I needed, children who thought I hung the moon, a life that wasn't perfect, but was mine. And I'd thrown it all away because I thought I deserved something better, something more exciting, something that would make me feel like the heroine of my own story, instead of just another suburban wife and mother. The joke I'd made about needing a new man had become a reality, but not in the way I'd imagined. I didn't have a new man. I had no man at all. What I had was an empty house, a custody schedule, and the growing understanding that the person who'd destroyed my marriage wasn't Oliver or his mother, or even Kellen. It was me. 3 months later, I watched through my kitchen window as Oliver picked up Ava and Milo for his weekend. They ran to his car, with the kind of excitement children should have for both parents, but now only seemed to have for him. He caught me watching through the window and gave me a polite nod. Not angry anymore, just distant. He'd moved on in a way I couldn't seem to manage, building a new life that didn't include me except as a footnote in the custody agreement. As I watched them drive away, I finally understood the punchline of the joke I'd been telling for months. I'd said I needed a new man, and I'd been right. The problem was, I'd never realized that the new man wasn't for me. It was for my children. And Oliver had become exactly that. A man who was strong enough to walk away from someone who didn't value what he offered, confident enough to rebuild his life, and wise enough to protect his children from the chaos I'd created. I'd gotten exactly what I'd joked about wanting. I just hadn't realized that getting it would cost me everything that actually